We all feel that we know Roz, or at least that Roz is a part of all of us. Since 1978, just 2 years after she graduated from RISD, she began publishing her cartoons with The New Yorker. For 37 years, she's laid bare her anxieties, fears, and foibles, always with a sense of the absurd. As you will find out when you read her latest graphic novel, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant, that was published last year and has gotten numerous awards. She grew up an only child in the epicenter of Brooklyn, which differs in every way from Notre Dame, the epicenter of Paris. If you read one book a year, make this the one, because it's something she really approaches in an intimate way, dealing with aging parents, and it's very open and revealing. And I have to say that I literally laughed and I cried when I read the book. It's a memoir about her life with her quirky parents and how she went from being a child to being the parent as they aged and eventually died. And it's an intimate journey full of heartache, anger, frustration, and joy. Also, not to be missed, the show at Corey Danese, which runs through next Saturday, April 18th, which is an amazing selection of her cartoons, but also these hooked rugs and these Ukrainian-style painted eggs. Like you would never, it was such a surprise. I never expected it, and it was really grand. So her New Yorker editor-in-chief calls her the magazine's only certifiable genius. So, and I want to know how you certify a genius. So, yes. Great. So we welcome Roz.
And thank you very much, Gracie.
I like to start with this drawing because it tells you a little bit about where I'm coming from. I was asked by a magazine to send a photograph of myself as a child, and I said, "Is it all right if I do a drawing?" And they said, "Sure, knock yourself out." So I have, I'm 9 years old, I'm lying on the bed, I'm reading the big book of horrible rare diseases. I'm surrounded by these other books, A Child's Garden of Maladies, Diseases of the Tropics, everything you were always wanted to know about scurvy but were afraid to ask, Lockjaw Monthly. Now, I don't know if this is like maybe people around my age, where I grew up in Brooklyn. Lockjaw was something we all had like terrible phobias about, and we knew like how you got it. You had a cut, then like some rust got into the cut, and then like suddenly, and you were drinking from a straw for the rest of your life. And I don't know whether, growing up in Brooklyn, maybe like we played on a lot of rusty playground equipment. I have no idea, but anyway, the book that was really the Bible in our house, though, was the Merck Manual. And I don't know, probably everybody here knows what the Merck Manual is, but it's just lists all the diseases. And when I was a kid, we had a copy in the house all the time. And the reason for this was that neither one of my parents were in the medical profession, but my aunt was a registered nurse. And she would always give the outdated copies of the Merck Manual to my mother, who was an assistant principal, but she was also a Dr. Monkey. And she loved this book, and so she always had it out, and she was annotating it, and she loved any kind of medical thing. And I did not understand the complicated parts of it, but I knew, even at the age of 9, what symptoms were. And I knew also that leprosy was very, very rare in Brooklyn, but rare did not mean that it never happened. And, anytime I felt any kind of tingling in my fingers, which was quite often, or that they just felt like barely numb or too cold or something, I thought, that's it. I have leprosy. So, anyway. I'm going to show a few just cartoons from relatively recent past. This is Pigeon Little. The sky is falling. The sky. Oh, look, part of a bagel. This is Urban Trail Mix. This is When Moms Dance. And the sight of an adult body is like, there's almost nothing to a teenager. In a teenager's eyes, there's almost nothing more repulsive. And I really totally get it, because I feel that way myself. But if you want to like gild that lily of disgust, all you have to do is do a little funky sort of dance, and your kid will say, Mom, stop, you're hurting me. This actually happened. This is not in the mood for a human interaction line, which I often feel. This is a fountain of puberty. I don't know if you've ever sat outside of a middle school and watched kids come out. It's really sad. Things kind of grow at different rates. You could be 4'11" and suddenly your chest is also 4'11". It's very strange. People sometimes ask where do you get your ideas for cartoons? And this was actually, I was on the train and I saw this ad. It was for Carvel cake. And it was this cute little girl. She's about 9 years old. She had pigtails. She's wearing these cute little cat's eye glasses, and she had a hat. And she's surrounded by her parents and siblings and friends. And on the icing of the cake is written, "Congratulations on your new glasses." And I thought, we have really set the bar pretty well. So this is where that came from. So it's I survived conjunctivitis, I can read a bus schedule, the cakes are no loitering arrests in 1 year, and wow, only 6 cavities. Cards are, I'm so glad you're not an arsonist. And congratulations on your new easy chair. And trophies, it's just participant. It's this is the MRI of love. There's certain genres in cartoons that I like. I like the tunnel of love genres. This is how Grandma sees the remote. TV explodes, cause nationwide blackout, tidal wave starter. Never saw this one before. Launch rocket ship, house blows up, drop the big one. This is just a declension. This is a desk joke, I guess. I don't know if you can read it back there. It's Can you read the words back there? Okay. This is the very first cartoon I ever had in the New Yorker, and I like to show it because people say, well, how did you get started at the New Yorker? And I never really thought I would wind up at the New Yorker. That was not my plan or intention when I started out. I wanted to, be a cartoonist. I had always wanted to be a cartoonist, and I always drew. But I really thought that my stuff, if I were lucky, I would wind up at the Village Voice, which was a sort of alternative paper in the late 70s when I was starting. Jules Pfeiffer did a strip for them, Stan Mack, Mark Allen Stamety, and I felt like they were cartoons, but they were something also else. And the New Yorker, my parents subscribed, and of course there were many cartoonists I loved, especially Charles Addams, but I didn't really feel like my stuff matched their stuff. Was that sensibility, but still, because they used cartoons, I thought, well, I should try them. And at that point, I had been selling cartoons. I had sold some cartoons to the Village Voice. I had sold some cartoons to the National Lampoon. I had sold some cartoons to a small magazine that was published for a while called Christopher Street. Anyway, so I called up the New Yorker, and I found out when they had their drop-off date, which, back then, before computers, everything was on papyrus, and we had, there were no cards, it was all donkeys, and it was a long time ago. And they said the drop-off date was Wednesday, so I thought, well, okay, I'll just take all of my stuff, and I'll shove it in this envelope, and I'll drop it off. And I didn't know how many or what, and so I just took about 60 cartoons, and I guess that was a lot. And this was one of them, and this was the only one that was like this. It was the oddest of the lot, and it's the kind of thing that, when you're sitting at your desk and you're doodling, and you make this little shape and give it a stupid name, and then make yourself laugh, chant. It's well, I do this. Maybe you don't do this, but just very, very personal. And when I went to pick up my portfolio the next week, there was a note in it from Lee Lorenz, who was the art editor at the time, and it told me to come back and see him. And I still didn't think that they were going to buy anything. It was just like, well, this certainly is an unexpected turn of events. And I went back, and I sort of was picturing, I remember this very well, because I was walking down the hallway in the old New Yorker building at 25 West 43rd, and I liked the hallways because they were kind of dingy, and they reminded me of my old school. And there was like this kind of old map of Manhattan, and everything was kind of quiet, and it was like very, I don't know, I liked it. And I went in to see Lee, and I just sort of was picturing in my head that he was going to say to me, and for some reason, I had him in this like Western cowboy accent. It was like, that I pictured he was going to say, well, little lady, why don't you come back in a few years and, see where you're going with this or something. And I had no idea where this came from. But instead, he actually pulled out this cartoon and he said, we're going to buy this one. And I was just flabbergasted. And he said, well, are you excited? And I said, yeah, but I just had no idea how to react. It was just so bizarre. And he said that I should start coming back every week with, and that was, because a lot of people, you just drop it off. But to be asked to come back, I didn't even think I realized at the time, because I was 23. So that's sort of what I've been doing pretty much ever since, except now I send them in as PDF. But still, I submit it every week still. But when they ran this cartoon, there were a lot of people that were very upset. And I didn't know that. He told me about this later. And he told me that one of the older cartoonists actually asked him whether he owed my family money. This is another very early one. This is Unwise Investments. And I like to show it also because I think when I was a kid, I subscribed to Highlights for Children, and they had this page called Our Own Page. And I was obsessed with it because Our Own Page was where the kids could send in poems or drawings. And I noticed this, I was like 9, 10 years old, and I noticed that like at least half of the drawings were of horses by little girls. And they had got their picture, their drawing published on Our Own Page. It was like, I would send in drawings, they would not be published. So it was like, I did not like horses. I was not interested in horses. I did not see horses because I didn't live in Montana. I lived in the middle of Brooklyn in an apartment. But I thought, if I want to be on Our Own Page, I better get on the stick and start learning to draw horses. So I had the sketchbook, and I remember this. I like filled up the sketchbook with drawings of horses, and I was so proud, and I named all of them, and they were like Blackie and Whitey and Prancy and, Brave One and, just things. And then I looked at them, and they were so terrible, but they were so funny. And I remember laughing and laughing. So I cannot draw horses still, obviously, but they come out funny to me. They come out like very oddly. And there's something, I remember this cartoonist, Sam Gross, who said that he had sold, I love Sam Gross's work, but he had sold a cartoon about sheep. And when he sold the cartoon, he thought he should research sheep to find out what they looked like. Because the way it works at the New Yorker, I'll tell you a little more later, is that you send in sketches. When he researched them and drew the sheep from the researched pictures, they weren't as funny as the ones that he had drawn out of his head. So I just think that's sort of it. You don't need to know what a horse looks like to draw it as a cartoonist. You have to draw it like how you picture it in your head. This is the very first cover I ever sold for the New Yorker. And to me, the meaning of it is quite obvious. It is a guy pointing to this chart, which is the evolutionary chart of ice cream. And my father's interpretation was that it's a doctor telling you what you shouldn't eat because these foods are bad for you. This is Subway Man, another cover from 2008. And this is, I'm going to talk a little bit about process here, since this is the life that I live, the freelance life. This is my desk here, and everybody, there's about 40 of us cartoonists on staff, approximately that number, and we each submit what we call, I don't know how this word started, but we call them batches. And that's like rough sketches of cartoons. They're like ideas and, the New Yorker used to call cartoons idea drawings, which is kind of what they are. You have an idea, you have a joke, and you try to draw it out. But, you don't just submit one. You might submit, I shoot for 6 or 7, that's my number, because some of mine are longer, but some people submit like 10 or 12. Just for the sake of math, easierness of math, I will say like approximately 10 cartoons per person. That's 40 people. All right. So, and then we each send our batch. We bring them in person. If you live in New York or you're like a nut and you need to do it in person, or you might, like me, send it through cyberspace. Actual photo of drawings going through cyberspace. And then all of this, it's like, so we have our 10 cartoons, 10 sketches of 40 people, that's 400, and then there's the drawings that come in over the transom. So it's about 800 drawings a week. And they get winnowed down. There's an art meeting every week, which is Bob Mankoff, who's the cartoon editor, David Remnick, who's the editor-in-chief. Then there's usually a few other editors there, so it doesn't just become two people's tastes, and that changes out. And I have never been at this art meeting, but I have been told about it. I know that it happens, but it's kind of like your parents having sex. You know it happened, but you don't want to see it, And from what I've been told, they spread this like now narrowed down group of maybe narrow from 800 to maybe 125 drawings. They spread them out all over the table, and then they do their selections for the week, and they might buy 20 or 25 drawings. So I don't really know what this art meeting looks like, but I always imagine it looks a lot like this. And I won't tell you which one is David and which one is Bob, but there's mostly this, because if they're buying 20, 25 drawings a week, which is all they do, that's like winnowed down from the original 800. It's mostly this. So most of what I do, I'd say easily 90%, probably more, because I don't sell every week, gets rejected. And my rejects wind up in my filing cabinets. And at this point, they're piled on top of the filing cabinets because they're full and I have them in boxes, and it's just a very sad story. So anyway, this is a real sort of basic Venn diagram. This is Mom's mortuary. He never should have divorced his first wife. She was a floozy, and this is what happens to floozies. He pushed himself too hard. She was never the same after that crackpot diet, and he moved to Florida, and boom, 5 minutes later, he was dead. This is just a silly Zelda drawing. I love the greeting card genre. This is narcissist cards. Wow, your birthday is really close to mine. Isn't that amazing? I almost had a sad thing happen to me, too. I can hardly speak about it without crying. Speaking of bon voyage, guess where I'm going? France.
This is on my refrigerator.
Yeah, that's funny. There's another card.
One quick question. You said you did sketches and you sent them to them.
Oh, sure.
But they must have been finished if you were going to be up for acceptance or rejection. They must have been actually finished cartoons.
Well, they're all there. They're just messy. They're messy. There's patches, there's crossouts. They're just...
But it's a complete...
It's a complete cartoon. Yes. The idea is there. It's just really rough. This is Valentine's for adults. I love you in an incredibly healthy, non-codependent way, of course. You're the one for me, along with all my other friends and my family and so many others. And happy Valentine's Day, darling. Don't worry, I don't even like you. And this is Mother's Day. I love the greeting card genre so much, and I do a lot of greeting card genre jokes. And one time I was asked by Hallmark Cards for some reason to go and speak to the people who made these cards. And exactly. And I was telling him about some of my favorite genres and laughing and like about like those trifolds that you see in the supermarkets where like somebody can't say to somebody like either like, you hate them so much you'll never want to speak to them again and you just have to write them off, or like, you want to like make up with them, and so you call them and you have like an uncomfortable conversation, and hopefully things get patched up. But no, you send like this trifle, the water. Sometimes there's waves, and those kind of cards, and they're always on like a pastel background and like a fake handwriting font. And I was laughing and laughing, and nobody else in the room was laughing. And it was a meeting like this, and suddenly I realized, that's right. Duh. This is in a supermarket. Yes, suggestive love. This is it. Here's what I'm thinking. How about you just relax and let me love every single inch of you? That's right. Every single inch. You're kidding me. This is like, with like happy 7th birthday. So, I don't know. This is Obit Man. I don't know. I don't know if you read the Obit pages. It's like, the sad thing is when somebody's 2 years older than you and you're thinking like, that guy's like really old. This is a real ad, and it comes from a funeral director magazine. And don't ask why I had this, but I like to show it because, I'm going to lead into my book, but I'd like to show this to sort of lead into it. This is a real bona fide ad. My mom always wanted the very best for me. Mom was really something. She always made sure I had the biggest birthday party and the prettiest dress at the prom. She'd say, honey, you deserve the best of everything. Even boyfriends. It seems no boy was ever really good enough for me. Then I fell in love with Joe. She was so proud of me on my wedding day. Her eyes sparkled through the tears. She hugged me and wished me the best possible happiness. Years later, she jokingly told me I probably could have done better. But he has helped make the best grandchildren. She never stopped giving me her best love and attention. It's my turn now, Mom, to give you the best because you deserve it. It's a casket company. I don't know if you can see this at the bottom here, but it is an ad for caskets. Okay, which brings us to my book here. This is a memoir I published last year about my parents last year's and trying to try my best to take care of them. This is my mother and my father and me. You can tell from this picture they were older when they had me, and they were very old-fashioned. They were born in 1912. My mother wore blouses that buttoned up the back. I don't even know where she bought them, like some special like clothing, some like factory outlet, factories that closed in like 1942 or something. I think really like time froze for them. She had this hairstyle. I saw pictures of her from the 30s. She like discovered a hairstyle in like 1935, and that was it. So yeah, this is them. My parents and I never discussed death. So, do you guys ever think about things? What kinds of things? Things. Plans. I have no idea what you guys want. Let's say something happened. Am I the only sane person here? You know what? Forget it. Never mind. Que sera, sera. Later that same day. Phew. It's like none of us wanted to have this conversation. This is an awful conversation to have. And I don't even know what exactly the conversation is. It's like, what you picture, what is it? Well, what you guys, when you become old and decrepit and you can't live in your apartment anymore, you don't want to have this conversation. So I was quite aware that my parents had tough lives, way, way tougher than mine. I had heard the stories my whole life about how their parents had come over from Russia at the turn of the century with nothing, about how my maternal grandfather had been an engineer in Russia, but how between his inability to speak English and his being Jewish, he wound up barely being able to support 5 kids and his wife working as a presser in the garment district, and how bitter and angry he was, and how my grandmother washed clothes for other people, and how even sadder my father's family was. His mother was one of 9 children. Not only was she the only girl, but she was the only one of her siblings to survive the Russian cholera epidemic. Then in a forest, her father had his throat cut from ear to ear by bandits. I heard this story growing up. I don't know what happened to her mother, but she came to New York, married my paternal grandfather, and had just one child, my father, by cesarean section in 1912, a horrible ordeal that involved, according to my mother, opening her up from her neck to her you-know-what. Between their one bad thing after another lives and the Depression and World War II and the Holocaust in which they both lost family, it was amazing that they weren't crazier than they were. Who could blame them for not wanting to talk about death? And my father was saying, let's discuss a more pleasant subject. And the title for the book really comes from him, because that was always, anytime like some uncomfortable topic came up, my father would say, let's discuss a more pleasant subject, or can't we talk about something more pleasant? My parents referred to each other without any irony as soulmates. The rocks in his head matched the holes in mine. They were born 11 days apart, and they grew up 2 blocks apart in East Harlem, New York City. They were in the same 5th grade class. They never dated, much less anything else, anyone besides each other. And my father's saying, we were too poor, which was always like, what? Aside from World War II, work, illness, and going to the bathroom, they did everything together. And my mother is saying, I'm going to Wallbounds. Hold on, I'm coming too. My mother even washed my father's hair for him. It's not as if they never fought, because they did. Don't sit sideways, you're twisting your kishkas. Kishkas, for those who don't know, it's intestines. But the concept of looking for something better or being happy, that was for modern people, or movie stars, i.e. degenerates. They were a tight little unit. Maybe they believed that if they just held on to each other really tightly for eternity, nothing would ever change. I visited them for the first time in years at their apartment in Brooklyn where I grew up. What I noticed first was the level of grime. What is grime? It's not ordinary dust or a greasy stovetop that hasn't been cleaned in a week or two. It's more of a coating. It's something that happens when people haven't cleaned in a really long time. One thing my mother always told me when I was growing up was, you have to dust. If you don't, the dust gets into all the interstices of the furniture and it breaks it all apart. It was clear that she had stopped worrying about that. Should add here that not a lot of people where I grew up used words like interstices, but that was my mother. But what do? If you pick up a sponge and start cleaning, look at me, it's perfect, daughter. It will not necessarily be perceived as helpful. The person you're trying to help might even feel insulted or embarrassed. Put that down, leave that alone, don't touch that. Daddy and I are fine. Don't upset your mother. I was not great as a caretaker, and they weren't great at being taken care of. This is like a very typical conversation I would have with my mother at this time. How's your cataract removal operation recovering coming along? Great! It's like there was a yellow scrim over everything, and now it's gone. I still have a patch over the eye, though. I should interject here that my father never learned how to drive. He was too anxious. I didn't learn to drive until I was 38, but my mother did the driving, and she was an anxious driver, too. She like gripped the wheel 10 and 2, and but she drove in Brooklyn, which is amazing, and with a patch, and she said, but not to worry, there's plenty of food in the house. Daddy and I just got back from Wallbounds. I'm picturing her on Ocean Parkway, this little lady in this big Dodge Coronet, which she had like this with a patch over the eye. And I said, Mom, listen to me, you can't drive with one eye. You have no depth perception. She goes, not a problem. Daddy guided me. By 2002, they were 90. It was hard not to notice that every time I came to see them, the grime had grown thicker, the piles of magazines, newspapers, and junk mail had grown larger, and they themselves had grown frailer. I could see that they were slowly leaving the sphere of TV commercial old age. Spry, totally independent, just like a normal adult, but with silver hair. I love this. This is like ads for Century Silver, and the people are like 55. And it's like, no. And moving into a part of old age that was scary or harder to talk about, not a part of this culture. This is like some idiot scientist going, extend human lifespan to 140. And I think, this is a person who's never taken care of really old people and knows he will never have to because maybe he has a sister. It's just unbelievable. Some people are so completely, well, anyway, I won't go digress. Running out of time. Something was coming down the pipe. It's no accident that consumer ads are pitched to people, most of them in their 20s and 30s. For one thing, they are less likely to have gone through the transformative process of cleaning out their deceased parents' stuff. Once you go through that, you can never look at your stuff in the same way. you start to look at your stuff a little post-mortemistically. If you've lived more than 2 decades as a consumer, you probably have quite the accumulation, even if you're not a hoarder. An ergonomic garlic press and throw pillows and those stupid sunflower dessert plates and 7 travel alarm clocks and 8 nail clippers and a colander and a flat iron and 3 old laptops and barbells and a set of fucking bocce balls and patio furniture and an auto harp, for God's sake, and your old flute from high school and a zillion books and towels and sheets and a wok you never used. And this is another typical conversation. This is actually a conversation I had with my mother. I was coming out to visit into their apartment in Brooklyn and said, Mom, what is with this oven mitt? It's from the year 1. It's disgusting. It's all burnt and it's cruddy and it's got patches on it. Oh my God. These patches come from a skirt I made 40 years ago in home ec. Please let me buy you a new oven mitt. And my mother says, why waste your money? That one still works. I tried to get them to accept even a little bit of help from outside. They didn't want any strangers in the apartment. My mother insisted no grocery store in Brooklyn delivered. Occasionally one of the neighbors helped out, but the grime and disorder were worse than ever, way beyond anything a mere tidying up could fix. And this is me staring at an ancient box of sanitary napkins in the towel closet. And I knew from the graphics on this box that they came from before the time when I myself became a woman. So they were like pre-1967. It was like, why in like 2000 something was this dusty box of sanitary pads still in the house? And it was only getting worse. A friend of mine said, you have found the source of the river eBay. But anytime I mentioned assisted living, the reaction is extremely negative. And these are like, the names of places, Sunset Gardens, End of the Trail Acres, Final Bridge Rest Home. Somehow they were able to see through the euphemisms. And finally they were there. This is my father. So what do they call this place? A rest home? No, Dad. It's called assisted living. And we're walking through the halls, and these are the posters that we saw. And it was like, there was actually a poster, and this was not in the Alzheimer's wing or anything. It was just in the regular wing. And it was like, they were cheery, but in this weird, infantilizing, horrible way. And it was like, why would they have an outer space themed dinner for people? They're not children. They need help, but they're not outer space. This is bizarre. My parents are kind of horrified, and I'm trying to put a brave face on it, and I'm going, look, they have a craft center. And my mother's thinking my daughter equals nitwit. And look, there's a gym and a little bar if you want to get a drink before dinner, and bingo all day long. And my parents are like, they've never been to a gym, they don't drink, and they don't play bingo. And my mother says, I'm getting fatigued, let's go back to your room. It really was like the place that I put them in, which sounds so fucking horrible, I hate it. It was the least bad of a lot of bad options. If I could have kept them in their apartment, I would have, but I was living in Connecticut. This place was 10 minutes from me. I couldn't keep them in their apartment. Even if I had somebody live with them, I didn't feel like I was living, I'm sorry if I'm going on about this, but like, they were not great options. I couldn't, even having somebody live with them, I wouldn't be around enough to sort of make sure things were going okay. If I lived in the neighborhood, I could drop by every couple of days, but I didn't. The first few months were fairly uneventful, although sometimes I had the feeling my dad was less than 100% enthusiastic. I knew it wasn't a hellhole, but even a top of the middle of the line or bottom of the top of the line place is still an institution. And institutions have rules. And this is the weekly staff assessment meeting. Your father doesn't like to bathe. He had this issue. My mother never called it a hellhole, but she had opinions. We're not residents, we're inmates. I'm sure it wasn't easy, but they were adjusting. Your father had an egg in his pocket all day yesterday. Thank God it turned out to be hard-boiled. I made sure their door always had decor. There's a little hook on the back that says Indian corn, flowers, things like that. No wreaths. One has limits. Door decor was not an important part of my parents' old lives. And my father was like, why would anyone want to call attention to their door? Which is like, if you're living in a kind of semi-crummy apartment house in Brooklyn, it's true. Why would you put something on your door to call attention to it? But when in Rome, I didn't want the other residents to think they were weird or anti-door decor. And this is like two like residents walking down the hall, and one is saying to the other, I heard the Chasts are from New York. The other's going, and this is a typical afternoon at the place. That was when I would write to my friends. I called it the place. Look, Dad, I brought you a cheese Danish. Oh, my favorite. Honey, care to share this with me? No, because I ate my lunch, unlike some people who were so busy socializing they neglected their lunch, which is why some people are hungry now. I'll cut it into quarters. That way, if you change your mind, you can have some. As I told you, I'm still full from lunch. Then I'll cut it in half, and I'll eat one half, and I'll put the other half away for later. Watch. He'll eat both halves, and then some people won't be hungry for dinner. And here's me, brilliance galore. I don't get, Mom, why you're the boss of Dad's Danish ingestion. Actually, your mother's right. She's a brilliant woman. Thank you, Elizabeth. And then all this stuff happened, and my father broke his hip, and he passed away at the age of 95. My mother lived another 2 years. There were many ups and downs. She was in hospice. She did very well at hospice. She came out of it. I got a 24-hour companion to live with her, and she lived another 2 years. And at the end of her life, I'm skipping a lot here, but I don't know what was going on. She may have had like these mini strokes. That's what I'm sort of imagining, that she was having these little mini strokes, because she was not senile, because I would be visiting her and we would have these like normal conversations. She'd be asking me about the kids and we'd talk about the news, and then she would suddenly come out with like these bizarro stories, and I started writing them down because they were fascinating. They were in a way like a window into something that I had never really experienced. And so this one was Dead, and I gave them titles. Dead Dad. Your father died before you were born, when I was pregnant with you. My father, Harry, said he would buy me a house and he would live with us and babysit you while I was at work. Mom, that's not true. Yes, it is, and I should know. This one is called Ass Full of Buckshot. There was a break-in at the place. All the men were moved over to the women's side. I shot the intruder with my BB gun. I gave him an ass full of buckshot. I'd like to stand him on a stage, pull down his pants, and take out the pellets one by one in front of everybody. And then unusual adoption. Did I ever tell you about how the Miltons got Paula? I had heard this story. I had not heard this version. They went out shopping, and when they got back to their car, there was a grocery bag leaning against the wheel. And inside the bag was a baby. I was on a launch. And it was weird because these stories were interspersed with total normal stuff. So that's why they were so odd. I was on a launch, and a woman who was naked down to her pubic, that's belly button, got stabbed in the heart by a flying swordfish. A terrible way to die. Maybe you dreamed it. Nope, I was right there. Of all the stories, I like this one best. When you were around 4, Daddy and I took you to Uncle Tom's cabin at Brooklyn College. When Simon Legree was whipping old Uncle Tom, you jumped out of your seat, ran to the stage, and yelled at him to stop hurting Uncle Tom. You said, "You're a bad, bad man." And then you took away his whip. You almost ruined the play. Did not happen. I'm sure of that. And then the story stopped, and we were in a whole different period. For a few months I would come to visit, and it was very quiet. And she had her aide who was there with her. And sometimes the aide would say, "Your mom, she woke up a little, and she asked for some ginger ale, or she asked for some ice cream, and then she went back to sleep." And she was sleeping most of the time, and she did not appear to be in any pain. But she was 97, and I think there were a lot of things going on. I mean, she had chronic diverticulosis, which would flare up to diverticulitis, and various things and other things going on. And basically, she was just falling to pieces. I mean, she was 97, and so I would go and visit her, and I just drew her. I'm not even really quite sure why. It was a way of being with her, I guess, and drawing is what I do. And I just started drawing. Drew her. she was basically subsisting on Ensure at this point. And I had no idea how long it would go on. I mean, these drawings were over a series of months. And that was the end. I hadn't planned on doing this drawing at all. I was home, and the aide called me and said my mother was passing, which was not a surprise. She had gone into hospice a second time. I went down as fast as I could, which was like 8 minutes, but I missed when she died. And then, all this official stuff starts to happen. The wheels get moving, and the aide leaves, and then she has to get the nurse, and then the nurse has to get this person, and then that person has to call the funeral home. But I was with my mother's body for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, while other people were running around doing this, and I drew her. I don't really know why. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about a book or anything. I just wanted to be with her, I guess, or see, or I can't articulate it. So anyway, I wish that at the end of life, when things were truly done, there was something to look forward to, something more pleasure-oriented, perhaps opium or heroin. So you became addicted. So what? All-you-can-eat ice cream parlors for the extremely aged, big picture books and music, extreme palliative care for when you've had it with everything else, the x-rays, the MRIs, the boring food, and the pills that don't do anything at all. Would that be so bad? And I'm not being completely facetious. I mean, I sometimes wonder, why, we don't even think about, like, maybe if there's some way to bring more pleasure to people who are in that part of life, And this is Nancy Drew and the Missing House Keys. I know, I left them right there. Nancy Drew and the Mystery of the 8 Pounds. How did I gain 8 pounds? I eat nothing. And Nancy Drew and the Secret of the Computer. You and I are going to be great friends. And so I'm going to just go through a few of these here. Dousing for coffee. This is Trapped in a How Are You vortex. No complaints. How are you? I'm good. How are you? Good. So how are things going? Fine. You? Everything's good. How about you? Good. How have you been? Good. How's life? Good. And yourself? No complaints. How are you? This could go on forever. This is Donna Karen's nightmare. Yeah. Well. In a just world. Yeah. It's the Holy Trinity. Yeah. And these are some of the eggs.
Do you use the traditional
wax
technique?
Yes, absolutely. I draw with they're not painted really. What you do is there's this tool, it's called a kiski, and you melt wax and you draw with the melted wax on the egg, and then you dip the egg into vats of dye, starting with the lightest, like yellow, and working your way up to black, yellow, maybe orange, red, and you can really, where you think in the negative, where you're putting your, which for some reason comes very easily to me, where you're drawing with the wax is where the dye is not going to go, and then at the end you melt all the wax off, and you are just like, oh my god, so beautiful. And the dyes are so vivid and so brilliant. I just really, really love them, and you can get all kinds of color combinations. Experiment. And, here's some more. This is some of the ones that are. It's really fun. These are some of the hooked rugs. A friend of mine taught me the technique, and this is my birds. I have birds. This is another one. This is a big rug. This is my father, actually. He used to have these. He retired early. He had these crazy breakfasts that he called them smorgasbords, and he would just put all of the stuff out on the table. He would not lay the ham directly on the table. I just did that for the thing. And he wouldn't eat a whole thing of borscht, but he liked all of these different foods at one time. So, and this is the last one. Whenever I see it, I go, hello? I just hear her voice in my head. And we're just finishing up here. This is a vain but realistic queen. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who, if she lost 10 pounds and had her eyes and her neck done, and had the right haircut, could in her age group be the fairest woman. And this is another genre joke. I love the end of the world guy, so I drew one and realized he needed a wife. So, and this is I love gravestone jokes. Tuned in, turned on, dropped out, dropped in, worked out, saved up, dropped dead, and that's it. So,